Dynasty Nerds on Better Sports Network.
Welcome back in. It is Thursday night, so you know what that means. It's Dynasty Nerds. It's the Better Sports Network coming together to bring you the Dynasty Nerd Show featuring me, Garret Price, your host. Look, I got a little cobweb up there. That was going to bug me. I was just flickering. Whoop, 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 whoop. Had to get that. Awesome show for tonight. Really excited. Arguably my best friend in the industry. Actually, he is my best friend in the industry. Arguably my best friend, period. Jared Wackerly is going to be joining us tonight. We are going to be discussing our brand new show that we just started. I'm really excited about it. Something that we have been talking about for years doing. And now it is finally coming together and we're getting an opportunity to do it. So I'm really, really excited about what that's going to mean, how that's going to come together. And we're going to talk about it on the show tonight. So really excited about that. And then, of course, we are going to have the very amazing, the awesome Dennis Bennett. Dennis Bennett joins us every single week. We're going to be talking. We did a rookie draft together recently. And there were some interesting things about that. And then we're going to be talking about some stashes, some people that you can get late on in your drafts that might be worth it. Maybe not even this year, but in the future. James says more content. Let's go. That's right. In fact, the first episode dropped today. You can find it both in podcast form called Talkin' Dynasty, and you can find it on the Dynasty Nerds page as well. So we are very excited about that. Yes. And that is our goal, is to be able to give you as much content as you can possibly consume. If we keep doing that, then we have done our jobs. So that is the goal in all of this. So he will be joining us here in literally just a few minutes. Peter says, looking great. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. I did just get a haircut yesterday. So I know hair is an important topic on this show. We've discussed it many times. So really, Heavy T saying looking suave. Really, look, you guys are just filling up my cup, making me feel all warm and stuff inside. Josh says, congrats, guys. I appreciate it, man. Yes, we're really, really excited. And yeah, it is. Whoops, I'm tilting my head the wrong way. It's a pretty strong part this time. Yeah, it's a pretty strong part this time. I'm liking it. The only problem is when I get it cut a little bit shorter on the top, if I'm not careful, my hair like tends to stand up. And if I can, let's see if I can get it this way. Like it starts to do this kind of thing. So I got to be like really careful to get it exactly how I want it, or it can be very tricky. So Josh says that his family will never get to watch TV again. And I love it. Yeah, that's the goal, man. Basically just to replace all of your entertainment streams with Dynasty Nerds content, with Better Sports Network content. Like at some point it's going to be, do I get live sports and do I get Better Sports Network and Dynasty Nerds? If the answer to those questions are yes, then really what else do you need? Nothing. Peter's asking how the air is up here. Not great, to be honest. Today was sunny with no clouds, and you would not have known that it was sunny with no clouds because it felt like it was completely cloudy the entire day because of all the smoke. So yeah, it's the air quality is like a real thing. I remember seeing some pictures of New York being like, wow, that's wild. And now it's come to our part of the country and it's been bad. It's been pretty bad if I'm being completely honest. So a little bit scary on how everything looks outside, but hopefully these fires get cleared up sooner rather than later. I'm crossing my fingers. But yeah. Josh said he smoked 3 packs of Canadian Wildfire today. Heavy T says, welcome to California 6 months out of the year. Yeah, you guys do seem to always have some sort of just wildfire going on in California and, droughts and things like that. And then just smog in general in larger cities is, a real issue. But I live far enough away from Columbus, and Columbus isn't like a huge city compared to New York and LA and Houston and Chicago and cities like that. So I don't really have to deal with that kind of stuff as much because I'm a good 35 minutes away from the city. So I'm a guy that's in the burbs. So Well, I believe that Jared Wackerly is with us. Heavy T, let me know if that is true. As soon as he is, we're going to get him on because I really can't wait to talk about our show. There's lots of really cool things that we have planned. We're going to be doing things just a little bit differently than we normally do things. And, on the Dynasty Nerd Show, we tend to talk a lot about players, specifically players, which is fine, but we really want to come at it with a little bit different angle. So we'll talk about it as soon as he gets on. Benjamin said, "Heard apocalypses generally pass in a day or two." So that's good to hear. Now that the world is ending, it should stop ending relatively soon. So I appreciate the lighthearted nature of that, Benjamin, and trying to keep our spirits up. So Peter says that he wants farm talk with Jared. We could talk a little farm. Jared is a true city boy though. So if you want him to do stuff behind the computer, it'll be great. If you want him to do, physical labor type stuff, it's not really his lane. He actually, anytime he does like a home improvement thing, he always messages me like, "Dude, guess what I did?" And so it's always kind of like a little bit of a thing between us. Michael says, "Congrats on the new show." Thank you so much, Michael. I do appreciate that. We're really excited about it, man. It's gonna be really cool. So normally I wait to get trade questions and things like that till later on in the show, but looks like Jared might be running a little bit late. So if you guys have any trade questions or anything like that, let's go ahead and start to put them out there now. And maybe I'll get to a few of them before we get Jared here on the show. And then once he gets on, we can take the rest mid show. So let's see. Oh, Jared's actually saying he does not have an invite. So Heavy T, I'll send you that email again. Let's see. Copy email. I'm going to send that to you again right now. Not sure. I'll let him know that it's coming his way. Oh, he's here now. Oh, there he is. I was literally texting you. Look at that.
Saw the little dots going.
Jared, did you shave between last night and today?
I got a haircut.
You got the haircut too.
I did.
It looks good, man. Looks good.
And you know me well.
I know my guy like that. All right, so welcome Jared Wackerly to the show. I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with Jared, familiar with what he does with Dynasty Nerds. If you've been following this show at any time, any length of time, you've seen him on here once or twice. And obviously, we've done a lot of things together with Dynasty Nerds and other things over the past few years. But Jared, real quickly, before we get into actual content, I wanted to tell everybody about how we first met. Because I think it's entertaining, and I think it's worthwhile having you on here. Like I mentioned before, Jared and I are very close friends, not just in the fantasy space, but outside of that as well. But we haven't known each other forever. We've known each other, what, 5-ish years?
Yeah, about 5 years.
About 5 years.
Yeah, it slid in my DMs.
That's exactly what happened. That is 100% what happened. I was doing something on Twitter and actually saw the guy that's going to be on later, Dennis Bennett. I saw him retweet something of this guy named Fantasy Jimbo. And
oh man,
I was like, "Oh, who's this guy?" And at this point, I'm fairly new to the fantasy space. I have like 400 followers or something like that. Like, same. I don't have a lot. I'm just starting out. My at is at GMP33 at that point. So _33 to be exact.
Yeah.
And got to put that in. And so I clicked the profile of the guy that just sent the tweet that I thought, oh, this is a fairly intelligent tweet. And obviously he's connected with Dennis somehow. So, that's cool. And I I click on it and it says North Canton, Ohio. And I was like, holy cow, I live in North Canton, Ohio. This guy lives in the same city that I do. So I like DM him, like all excited, like, hey man, like I do fantasy football stuff too. And like, we should meet up at some point. Like, where in Canton are you? Blah, blah, blah. And I clicked send. And then I realized that it's like 12 something at night. And I'm like, I'm just a random guy on Twitter that slid in this guy's DMs past midnight. How ridiculous does that look?
I know.
Jared, what was your reaction like getting a DM late at night? Like, hey, I live near you.
No, I thought it was cool. I mean, at that point, I was in the same boat, and it was honestly never thought anything was ever going to come of just tweeting out my thoughts about fantasy football because I just loved playing. I loved playing the sport, obviously. And then when that was done, I was like, well, I mean, I have all this like knowledge like about the game, I've played and like all this other stuff. So I'm just tweeting out what I think and putting player threads out there because that's always been my passion. And Dennis said it right there. It must have been a Preston Williams thread because I liked him a lot. He had good year or something. But yeah, you slide in my DMs and we meet up at the Winking Lizard right up the street. And I think the first thing I said, I was like, hey, so weird thing, but my handle's Fantasy Jimbo, but my name's actually Jared. I don't know why. Like, I was just like, I wanted to go by like anonymous, I didn't want my name attached to what I was putting online because of work. And now I don't care. I am who I am. And
James asked what the take was. It was probably something positive, Preston Williams. You're a pretty big Preston Williams guy.
I mean, I was realistic about him. I think I pegged him as like a day 3 guy, but a guy that I liked.
Somebody you said was like, might go, day 3 undrafted, but I really like him kind of thing. And he did for a second. He did flash.
Yeah. And you should have traded him if you understand how to play the game.
There you go. All right, Jared. Well, the real reason I brought you on is not to recap our history of friendship, but to talk about the new show that we have coming up. And actually, I say coming up, the first episode's already out, which was very fast. I did not expect it to be out and ready. It's like already on iTunes and everything. We literally recorded this last night.
Yeah. Well, I've gone through that process before, setting up a podcast, and
that's true.
Dude, I mean, work for me, like real work, like not Dynasty Nerds and Fantasy. I mean, it's been really hectic lately. It's been crazy. So I told my boss today, I'm like, dude, I'm burnt out. He's like, hey, just take the rest of the day off. So I spent that time working on other work, It's like, I'm gonna get this podcast out, put an intro on it. But yeah, if you guys haven't checked it out, it's Talking Dynasty, and it'll be on Dynasty Nerds YouTube channel. And it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you can find podcasts. So, give it a listen. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, give it a listen, give it a rating and all that stuff, because obviously we want this to do well. So the better it does, the more we do. If it tanks, then it's like, well, we got.
I don't even care, dude. True. I mean,
it's just fun doing.
We're gonna do what we want to do, and love it or hate it.
Explain what we're doing, because this is going to be a slight detour from our typical Dynasty Nerds content.
Yeah, so, I mean, the main thing is we wanted to bring on folks from the industry that are smarter than us or know about a particular thing a little more than us, especially like analytics guys that are heavy into the data. Garrett and I, that's not really like our strongest suit or we spend the most time in. Anybody that has like a really specific area or lens that they focus on, that we think, are worth like talking to and diving deeper in and bringing just a different insight for everyone to hear, and just want to pick their brain about how they go through that process. What different things do they do, and what they're doing in their life. So the interviews will be coming, and then if we don't have an interview, we're gonna be focusing on like more game theory, dynasty strategy type things rather than player analysis, week to week player analysis, buys and sells and stuff.
Yeah. And I'm excited about that, because I do think at Dynasty Nerds, we do a great job of discussing specific players, especially during rookie time, talking about all of their abilities, all their strengths, all their weaknesses, all of the things. But game theory and understanding how to work this game of Dynasty to your advantage is something that I don't think is discussed enough. And hopefully that's something that we can do a good job of explaining some of the nuances of the game and learning how to game the game to make sure that you can get an edge and you can get an advantage and things like that. So it is a little bit of a different route. And look, we're not reinventing the wheel here. There are other people that have talked about game theory and things like that. So it's not
There's people that know way more
yes
about this stuff than me, and that's the purpose of bringing people on.
Yeah,
like,
but chances
I want to
are they're
learn
not as good
too.
looking as you, though.
Tell my wife that.
Yeah, please do. Tell her I said hi as well. So I wanted to give people a little bit of a taste. If they haven't watched the show yet, or they haven't listened to the show, like we said, you can find it on iTunes, Spotify, whatever. It is also on YouTube, though. So if you want to look at our beautiful faces while we do that, and hopefully I figure out what's going on with my mic. Does my mic sound better on here, Jared?
Yeah.
I bet it was something I did.
I don't know. My wife, that's the first thing she said, because she does she runs the broadcast journalism program at the high school that she teaches at. And first thing she said, "What's up with his mic? It sounds echoey."
Yeah.
I was like, yeah. She's like, "It sounds like he's using his camera mic."
That's probably what happened. Sometimes I will click like the Cam Link 4K. I'll click that as the mic instead of the camera. And then
guys, I mean, I have to deal with this.
This is what you have to deal with,
like all
behind the scenes.
Yeah,
all the time. You could have told me I sounded bad. You should have just told me.
I didn't really pick up on it at the time, honestly.
All right.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's get into a little bit of what we talked about on the show. And the show itself is really centered. This specific show was really centered around startups. And the reason we did that was, I mean, there were a few different reasons we did that. One, it felt like a logical place to begin in the process, right? Like
start up the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're a part of a startup, Jared, what are some of the things that you are looking at like right away? Like I invite you to a brand new podcast, or not podcast. I invite you to a brand new league or a podcast or whatever. I invite you to a brand new league. What are some of the first things that you're doing?
I'm looking at the league settings, how many of each position I'm required to start, start 3 wide receivers versus 2 wide receivers, how many flex spots there are. And we kind of got into that a little bit on the show, obviously. And, you got to just look at it from a supply and demand perspective. So if you need to start an extra wide receiver rather than 2, then that increases the demand, obviously, for wide receivers. So that might drive the value up in your drafts, or you should be conscious of that. And, you might need to take receivers a little earlier than you normally would. So I'm looking at league settings like that. I'm going to adjust my rankings if I feel I need to. So I'm going to have my own personal tiered based rankings next to me. And I say tiered based because I think tiers are so important, specifically for startup drafts. It helps guide you in your trade decisions. If you're sitting right at the beginning of a tier and you're on the clock, but the tier is about 7 players deep, well, I might look to trade back 6 to 7 spots and pick up some extra draft capital in the next rookie draft or further on down in the startup. And I'll be happy with getting that 6th or 7th guy. And then ADP, you got to have your own ADP, a source that you rely on and you trust. Don't just look at the sleeper ADP because everyone else in your draft's looking at it. We're going to be dropping a Dynasty Nerds ADP here very soon, and you can use that. There's other ADP sources out there, so find one that you like and have all of that information at your fingertips.
Yeah, and I think you said it, but scoring settings, like not even just the rosters, but the scoring settings, like just even small, minute things can drastically change where you draft certain players, not even just one position over another, but even guys within their own positions, depending on like what the PPR is, a half point, no points, full point, do it by first downs. Like there's a lot of different ways that they can do that. And that is going to change where you have Austin Eckler versus Jonathan Taylor, guys like, so all of those things do matter. And look, I told a story about me, but I've been in other leagues before where people literally just hopped in assuming that it was, and this was a few years ago at this point, assuming it was just one quarterback, only to realize midway through the draft that it's a super flex league, and they couldn't figure out why everybody's taking quarterbacks so early.
How do you like mess that up? You know,
I don't know. Like seriously, it was like third or fourth round, and dude was like, "Why is everybody taking all these quarterbacks? This is so dumb." And somebody was like, this is a super flex league.
I want my money back."
He's like, "Oh, I'm an idiot." So those kind of things can drastically, affect things, within your league, how you look at it. The other big thing that I think is arguably the most difficult thing for people to gauge in a startup draft is trading. Like trading is that one piece that even people that I know that are seasoned dynasty players are
I still struggle.
Yeah. Like Matt and I were talking about on the Dynasty Nerds pod a couple weeks ago, and he hates trading in startups. Does not
It's
like
hard.
doing it. It is. And you can, I mean, obviously it can go several different ways, but you can drastically improve your team, but you can also drastically tank your team if you do not evaluate your trades well in a startup.
The decisions are so important. And I think that's the biggest thing is like, it's just such a big decision. So is this going to hurt me or is this going to help me? I don't know.
So how do you tend to look at it when, like, if I were to offer you a trade right now, let's say you're at 106 and I want to move up to 106, but I don't want to give you my first round pick. So I want to give you, my second round pick. I'm at 111. I'll give you my second round pick and my fifth round pick and a first next year. Like, how would you evaluate that? Is that too much, too little? And obviously we're just throwing out like rounds and stuff. So don't hold us to like these exact things, but just as a general concept.
Well, I would look at ADP and help that I can kind of see what players might be attached to those picks and put them side by side and, in a vacuum, how's that trade look? And then I'm thinking about, I am trying to pick up future firsts in startups if I can, for free in a way. And that's another thing you can do with using tiers. You can try to pick up, you can call it like free picks because you're cool with 7 players in the same value range. So you can pick up some extra picks. You can kind of look at them as like, oh, these are free. But that's one thing I do is kind of look at them like it's an actual trade with players in it. Another thing you can do is like, if you don't necessarily know what the value is of a future first round rookie pick, you can look and see where the current rookies are going from the 2023 class inside of the startup and kind of get a feel and a gauge for what, if a mid first might look like. So the guys that are going like 106, 107, where are they going right now in terms of ADP inside of a startup? That can kind of help gauge you. But it's difficult. It's not an easy thing to do, in my opinion. It's the number one thing I struggle with personally inside of startups. So you got to take your time with it. You got to make sure that you're prepared with all of that information and have it handy so you can really evaluate when you do get offered or you need to make an offer to someone.
Yeah. So, we go over trading, we go over the things you need to do before your draft starts. We kind of go over each position and kind of some general thoughts, some general feelings on each position and how to value them in a startup, whether it's a 1 QB versus super flex or, if you're going with a little bit of a specific strategy, how that kind of plays into it. We talk a lot about value-based drafting. Jared, do you want to explain, like, when we say value-based drafting, like what does that mean?
So it's, letting the draft come to you rather than, hey, I haven't taken a running back in like 5 rounds. My team, like, I don't have any running backs. Like, what am I going to do? I need to take a running back here. And, instead of reaching for a running back because you feel like you need to fill a team need, no, you just, you find the next guy on your tier sheet or your ranking sheet kind of evaluate the ADP. Does it dictate that this guy is falling and he's good value right now? Or, you just want to avoid reaching on players. Yeah. And another thing I just want to bring up is you should document what you do in your startups. Mm-hmm. What trades did you send out? Did they get declined? What trades did you send out that got accepted? What were people offering to you? What trades got done by others? If you document all those type of things, it can really help you learn when you're looking back, or if you're in another startup, you can kind of look and see what happened in this other one. And once you've compiled a lot of that information, you'll learn a lot quicker, and you'll have a reference to look back on.
Yeah, no, that's an absolutely great point. So trying to think, we talked about a ton of stuff. What else did we touch on in there? Like, we just talked about the value-based drafting.
Yeah, we talked about like positional, how the different positions are, what you should think about in terms of value with quarterbacks, running backs, specifically quarterbacks in super flex leagues. But even 1 QB leagues, like how many do you roster? How does a start 7 league change the value of the quarterback position in a 1 quarterback league versus like a start 10 league?
Sure.
So we talk about all sorts of things, the age cliffs at what wide receiver and running back, how to think about that. Taking older veteran wide receivers that still have like 3rd, 4th, 5th round ADP. Like, what are you doing with those type of guys? Are you still drafting them? Personally, I'm staying away from them. We got into that a little bit because their value is never going to go up again. It's going down. So they're a dying asset unless they're falling, and you're in a draft and you can get good value with them.
Yeah. So check out the Talkin' Dynasty show with me and Jared. We discuss all of these things. It's an hour-long episode. It might not always be an hour. It's going to be a little free flowing with how long the topic takes us. If it takes us 40 minutes, it takes us 40 minutes. If it takes us an hour and 40 minutes, it takes us an hour and 40 minutes. It's just going to be however things flow that specific night. But I'm really excited. Jared, give the people a couple of the topics we're considering. We haven't finalized anything, but a couple of the other topics that we're kind of considering moving forward.
I know we want to do a show on like being a commissioner, different league settings, and things that we do to commission our leagues, maybe off-platform ideas that you can implement to help generate buzz within your leagues, anything all-encompassing of being a commissioner. And then I know that we wanted to get into like trading, just the generic term or generic topic of trading, all encompassing of trading. Like there's a lot that goes into it, strategy and tools that you can use. So and then we want to have on some people to interview, and I know we've got a few people in mind, so we're gonna start lining them up, and won't say any names yet, but start scheduling those out for the year.
Yeah, and if you guys have any specific topics that you're like, I haven't heard this talked about much, but I'd really like to know more about this, or how you guys evaluate this. And, we've talked about doing the different strategies, the different startup strategies that people do, and, how that plays into things. And, I'm sure at some point we're going to get into Devy stuff. I think we're going to even do that potentially on the actual Dynasty Nerd show. We're going to take Talking Dynasty to the Dynasty Nerd show. So talk a little Devy action in there as well. So lots of different things. And yes, it is available in a podcast format. You can literally look at just type in Talkin' Dynasty on Apple Pod, Spotify, whatever, and it should already be up and available for you to listen to right now. So go ahead and head over there. Check that out. We would really appreciate that. Jared, before we get you out of here, I did want to touch on one other thing, just because I love talking about it. Nerd Score. So Nerd Score was kind of the first big project you and I started working on together. And I would like to think that is somewhat of the crux of why we even want to do something like this, because the Nerd Score was a little bit outside of the box of just typical talking about players and things like that. It was diving into how valuable is tape, and can you determine a player's value before you even know their landing spot and their situation and their draft capital and all those kinds of things. So touch real quickly on the nerd score, how we got it going, where it is now, like anything on the nerd score that you want to touch on.
Yeah. So the main thing that we wanted to put out there was a metric that is based on tape evaluation strictly, that you could look back on and kind of see how we did and see if what we're saying or if we're reliable to listen to. And I think the biggest thing, or the biggest criticism of people that are, tape watchers or tape scouts, armchair, or what do you say, armchair quarterbacks or something.
Yeah.
Was like, there's no like data or numbers associated with it. So there's really no way of looking back to see if, these guys, or if anybody's good, or if there's any predictive nature to what you're doing. So we formulated a formula, a weighted average across multiple categories that we felt were, that contributed to a running back success or a wide receiver success. And Garrett and I, we study a lot of tape and we grade these players on it, and it spits out a nerd score. And I think over the years, we've proven that we do pretty well. And I know that there are some people in the industry that use our score to help drive their, their all encompassing metrics for rookie analysis and stuff. So it's come a long way. I'm really happy with it. I know that we are going to iterate on it a little bit. Like maybe we'll create like a separation score and, just some other little nuances to the nerd score that we can put out there just from our raw numbers and tape grades that we put into these different categories and stuff.
Yeah, we just finished up year 4 of the nerd score.
It's crazy. It's so fun to look back on that now. Like,
oh, it's super fun.
And when we started, this is like the point where we were like, God, I can't wait till we're 5 years down the road and we can look back and see and compare all these guys, like on.
Yeah. And we've done really well overall. We've had some misses. Don't get us wrong. We've had some misses.
Yeah, they're always going to have misses
especially early on. But I feel like every year it seems to get a little bit better and a little bit more consistent.
The first year was our worst year.
Yeah. And so the fact that we keep improving upon it does excite me. And it's fun to go back and look at the guys like, oh man, we totally knew that was going to happen. We crushed that. Or like, ooh, wish we could have that one back. But
Jalen
a lot of
Reagor,
those we learned on.
Denzel Mims.
Yep. Yep. Those first year receivers that
always remember the misses the most. And like for me,
sure.
Yeah. It's like, but
that's frustrating.
It happens. I'm not perfect.
Exactly. But Jared and I then did a video release of the nerd score this year. It was the first time we had ever done that. And that was really what got everything moving for us to do this show, because we did it. And that one was at or over 2 hours.
2 hours? Yeah, dude, that was long.
It was a long show. And we could have gone longer. We kind of had to cut it off because we were like, this has been taking forever. I'm done. But so that was kind of the jumping off point for us to start this new show and get all of that going. So it's very exciting for me. I know it's exciting for you as well, Jared. So I appreciate the time to put all that together, man.
No, for sure, man. I'm looking forward to continuing to roll this out, and I'm really excited to see what guests we bring on and what kind of topics that we get into. And I personally, like, the biggest thing I'm looking forward to is learning. Like, yeah. I'm just looking forward to learning from people that are better at areas that I'm not strong in. So
yeah,
and asking them questions and just learning different perspectives on how people play and how people evaluate things.
Perfect. All right, Jared, let's get you out of here. Before you get out of here, though, tell everybody where they can find you on Twitter, Something specific you want to tell them you're working on, although I guess we just told them a lot of what we're working on right now on the show, but tell people where they can find you.
There's always other things we're working on behind the scenes. I've been learning some database management coding language. Brian's been helping me with it.
Of course,
I'm trying to get better at all that. But I'm on Twitter at Jared Wackerly. It's on the screen there. And the podcast, and search YouTube for Talking Dynasty with Garrett and Jared.
Perfect. Well, we are going to take a quick break. Feel free to put more questions in the chat. I'm going to get to as many of those trade questions, draft questions, whatever it is. Any questions that you have, go ahead and put them in the chat now. I'm going to get to all of those as soon as we get back from the break. We'll see you in a minute.
I feel like this is a quietly contentious point in Dynasty Fantasy Football, what it means to actually be rebuilding. Some people say you should never truly be rebuilding. How do you view the rebuilding versus competing dichotomy in Dynasty?
So I will be the first person to acknowledge that my preferred format of fantasy football is just redraft. The years that I have played Dynasty, it has been, I've drafted a win now team because I've seen people that have just gotten into the cycle of rebuilding and thus they just don't make any progress. So if you're rebuilding for the 5th year in a row, I just, I don't know exactly how you get out of it, but yeah, it's definitely something that can happen. And a lot of people, especially when we come out of the NFL draft, everyone's just instantly shipping off, draft picks and everything. So, I mean, it's definitely something that can happen.
Joey, do you feel similarly to it? Do you feel like you see people getting stuck in the rebuilding loop?
I mean, I would say people that try to rebuild in the beginning of seasons, of their fantasy seasons, I see them get stuck in that rut. I would really try to only ever rebuild if I knew I was going to miss the playoffs. Like, I'm always trying to play to win, even if it's maybe I don't know.
I think my big thing is the word rebuild is a much shorter time frame than I think most people say it should be. Like, they look at rebuild as like 3 years out competing. Rebuild, you're looking to compete next season. You know what I mean? Like, if you're doing it now, you're looking to revamp, and maybe there's a one season where you ship it off, but that very next season you should be competing. If you're doing it like that, I'm cool with it, but you gotta have a plan, not just keep getting the young players, keep getting the draft picks. Otherwise, you end up like Tim. Maybe not like Tim who gets a bye, but you make the playoffs, you're in that like 4 to 6 range every year, just hovering in the middle. Nothing ever gets better, nothing ever gets worse.
I think I play like you in Dynasty, Simon. I play in 3-year windows.
100%. That's my go-to. And with the rate at which Dynasty leagues turn over, you should really only ever play in a 3-year window.
Well, that ended quicker than I realized it would. Slid in just at the nick of time. But we are back at Dynasty Nerds on the Better Sports Network. Thank you again to Jared Wackerly for coming on, joining us, talking about that new show. Josh said, loved the all-time fantasy draft last week. I really enjoyed doing that. That was honestly one of the most favorite episodes that I had ever done. Was last week's episode with Peter and with Dennis talking about the all-time list. And looking back, there were a couple that I would absolutely do a little bit differently if I had to do it over again. But it was fun getting to talk about these players because, when you're an strictly NFL guy, you have a lot more to talk about. You can talk about present, but you can talk about past. We don't get to talk about the past as much in fantasy football because we're focused so much on trying to make sure our teams are ready for now, are ready for the future. We don't get to look back very often. So a chance to get to look back, get to talk about names like Barry Sanders and Walter Payton and, just Jerry Rice, Calvin Johnson, like names that I haven't gotten to talk about either in a long time or ever. Got to talk about it and talk about what they did on the field, the numbers that they were putting up, their fantasy finishes, like all of that kind of stuff. Don't normally get to do that. So yeah, that was one of the most fun episodes. Peter and Dennis did a great job too on that show. Yeah, other than Peter's tight end strategy, he would have regretted that long term. Way too many, especially on a shorter rosters like that. Way too many tight ends. No one picking Bo Jackson was tough. I considered him, and honestly, I should have looked deeper into his numbers because he might have been good because he had a shorter career, so there would have been less of a window for like some of those bad seasons. So maybe I should have looked a little harder. If we ever do it again, I'm going to look into his numbers a little bit more before the show, and make sure that I'm well educated on the exact seasons of Bo Jackson to make sure that I can get him or not get him, depending on all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, that truly, like when I look back at all the shows that we've done on Better Sports Network, that is easily top 3, and it might be my most favorite show that we've done so far. So maybe at some point I'll have to bring that back. Maybe we'll get some other people on, some different perspectives on how you would do it. Maybe I'll put some caveats and some things like that in it to spice it up a little bit. But yeah, that was really, really fun. All right, let's get to some of these trade questions, things like that. So feel free to put your trades in the chat, and I will I'll get to as many as I can in this. And we've got plenty of time until Dennis Bennett comes on. He's going to be joining us right around the 10:15 mark. So he'll be on here in about 25, 35 minutes. So he will be on here soon. So feel free to get in all of these trade questions that you can, and I'm going to get to them. So Michael Anthony said he received Pitts and Dotson for Jamison Williams, a Devy first, Drew Aller, and Brandon Ennis. So the Devy first, I'm assuming that is in the when we're talking about that, we're talking specifically about like the freshman draft, right? Because I wouldn't think you would redraft it. So yeah, I'm guessing that's the rookie part of that. I'm always going to go with the players that have already proven something. So I would absolutely take Pitts and Dotson for all of those assets. And look, Drew Aller is a really good prospect for Penn State, quarterback. Lots of hype around him. Ennis looks like a very good player. The Devy first is always appealing, but all of those guys could be nothing this time next year. All of them could be nothing. And even Jamison Williams, as much as I think Jamison Williams is a talented player, we really don't know what he's going to be bringing to the table. We think it's going to be big plays and, he's going to dominate in this offense and all of these things, but truly we don't know at this point. So getting two players that have shown a little bit more. Now, these are still young guys in Kyle Pitts and Jahan Dotson, but we saw more or less a full season from Jahan Dotson, and he performed very well this past year, just putting up ridiculous numbers, specifically in the end zone, lots of touchdowns. And then on top of that, Pitts is a top, especially in a tight end premium. And I don't know if this is tight end premium or not, but in a tight end premium, we're talking about a top 3 round pick. Some people might even be willing to take him as high as a second. I don't think I would personally, but there might be people that are willing to take him that early. So, yeah, I would say the Pitts and Dotson. I just saw this note. Heavy T said, of course, this was the week I was off. LOL. Speaking to the all-time draft, I feel bad. Yes, he was not here for the all-time draft, and it was truly a joy to do that show. All right. Benjamin Squire says, Superflex was offered Chig and a third for Carr. I felt like I could get more. Good offer or not? I feel like you should get it more as well. In a Superflex league, look, Chig is right now a 11th round startup pick, whereas Carr, you're taking in the 6th, 7th. And we talk about it on the show that I was just talking about with Jared, but quarterbacks are one of those few positions that after the draft almost always gain value. So when you have a position like that you know is going to gain a significant amount of value, you have to go and try to get those guys early. So if you're trying to trade and get my starting quarterback, or one of my quarterbacks, Carr might not be starting for you, but you're trying to get one of my quarterbacks, you're going to have to overpay in order to get that guy. You're not going to be able to neglect the quarterback position, which is arguably the most important. Not even arguably. It is the most important position in a super flex league. You're not going to be able to neglect that position and then just get a guy in the cheap. So when it's quarterback, if it's a fair value, I probably still want a little bit more. And I'm not even sure that this is fair value. So I would say right now, I would be looking at probably holding on to Derek Carr unless I was offered a little bit more, because I just don't think that was enough. All right. Sedated Fork says, is that Jared Kelsey a new Kelsey brother? That's not a trade, but I could see what he's saying. Like him and Travis, there's a little bit there. I could see it. That's a good call out there. I'll have to ask him if he has any relation distant, because remember, we are from Ohio. The Kelsey brothers, Cleveland, could be. All right. Just Josh said, Superflex tight end premium league. I only have Dak and Kyler, but I am a contender. I've got Pickett, Antonio Gibson, and Javonte for Henry, Hill, and Pierce. All right. He said Pickett, Gibson, and Javonte for Henry. So Derrick Henry, Tyreek Hill, and Damian Pierce. That is a difficult one. On that deal, I'm probably going with the Pickett side. It is tough to not have somebody like Derrick Henry and Tyreek Hill in a startup, but startup wise, you would have to draft Hill probably about a round to a round and a half ahead of Javonte. But then those other two guys are going well below Pickett. You need the quarterback. I'm somebody that believes in Javonte. So I probably would do what I just talked about. I would trust in the quarterback position, and I would take Antonio or Pickett, Javonte, and Antonio Gibson. So, of course, let's see. Is this going to work? This is not working. This is how it goes sometimes, guys. It would not be a Dynasty Nerd show without there being some sort of technical difficulty. And of course, as I'm doing this, my mouse just died on me. So let me, you know what? This is a little earlier than we normally do. Heavy T, if we can maybe take another commercial break, I need to go get a charger for my mouse so that way I can scroll and actually see the rest of these comments because I cannot see them currently. And that's just how the show goes. So let's take a quick break. When we get back, I will have the mouse plugged in and we will continue with the show. We will be back. Dynasty Nerds on the Better Sports Network.
Breece Hall right now, and I've talked to plenty of high-stakes players, I'm sure you have too, Kev. Had Hall not torn his ACL last year, he might have been the 101 in drafts this year. That's how good he was looking last year, and obviously with the addition of Aaron Rodgers. At the 305, running back 11 behind Derrick Henry and Ramondre Stevenson, right ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs and Najee Harris. Your thoughts on him as a mid-third round pick? How have you been attacking him? Have you been getting him at that spot so far this year?
Yeah, if I start out with two wide receivers, Breece Hall is right at the top of the queue coming into the third. If I knew he'd be healthy for week one, I was still a little.
Well, he'd be going higher than the mid third.
Right. He may go 101. Well, RB1 at least.
Yeah.
But I don't think we know that. Even if he's healthy in spring and the summer, I still like if I'm running a team, if I'm the coach, I'm bringing him back slow. Like he's on a pitch count. Like I want him for the end of the season because I got Aaron Rodgers for the playoffs, right? Like, even if he's fully healthy, I would work him in slow. But that is actually what you want. Like, he's still going to get the high value touches. So, yeah, if we know he's healthy, he's a first rounder. So, like, if he's sitting there in the third, especially when I get 2 wide receivers to start, I'll take Hall all day.
Yeah, it almost makes me think that the uncertainty with Breece Hall has made him unfairly fall too far, right? Like,
Right.
Because we're talking about the team here in June. They're still hoping that he's ready for week 1. This is not, oh, we'll see what happens. Oh, we're taking it day by day. Oh, we're liking how he's coming along. No, they still think by week 1. And the fact that we have that timeline, I think, maybe bumps him up, especially as the drafting season gets deeper and deeper here in July and August. Maybe we start seeing him go up the boards as well.
We are back. Dynasty Nerds, Better Sports Network, on a beautiful Thursday evening in the off season, but we are still talking fantasy football, and we have a charging mouse now. So hopefully we will be able to keep everything running nice and smooth. So, few questions that popped up. Peter says, does the Cam Robinson suspension change anything with how you project the Jags offense? Look, anytime that you lose an offensive lineman that is a plus offensive lineman, and I think we would say that Cam Robinson is a plus offensive lineman, it's going to hurt. But they drafted a guy that they kind of expect to be his replacement. So if there was a team that could afford to lose their offensive line, it would probably be this team here. This is a team that could afford to lose a guy and still keep on ticking. And look, it's only a 4-game suspension as well, so it's not something that's going to be a long-term issue. So I'm not really changing any of the projections as far as passing yards, rushing yards, anything like that. I think this is a well-coached team, a team that's on the come up. They have plenty of time this offseason. It's not like it's something that happened a week before the first game of the season. This is something that they have probably knew about longer than we have, and they've been preparing for it. So I think that this team is going to be just fine. I'm really not worried at all about the offense. In fact, I think it is going to be one of the better offenses in football this year. And for fantasy football, there will be a lot of goodness to be had there. So not overly worried about that. Daniel says, I don't know, Jameson's been coached very well. That has to count for something, especially since we haven't seen an opportunity to see what J-Mo can do. And look, you're absolutely right. We haven't gotten to see, but it is a good coaching staff. We see how they've brought along Amon-Ra St. Brown, and obviously that has to count for something. But I'm always going to, in any Devy trade, I'm always going to favor the NFL players, always, because it's tough enough to project rookies. Once you start projecting guys that are still in college, especially ones that have not shown truly elite traits yet, I mean, a lot can change. Injuries, transfers, guys just sucking it up. I mean, look at DJ Ungalele and Spencer Rattler from a couple years ago. Those were 2 of the top 3 picks in every single Devy draft. Now, almost no value. Could they still resurrect their career after transferring and things like that? Sure. But they lost a ton of value. Year before that, Sam Howell. Now, we like Sam Howell a little bit this year, and he's done some things, but right after his college career, and we thought he could be the number 1 overall pick, he went to the 5th round. It's not exactly ideal for what you're wanting there. So I usually, and granted, rebuilds are slightly different, but especially when it's still young players and Jahan Dotson and Kyle Pitts, I'm going to favor that side because I have a much clearer picture of what I'm getting, and I'm not having to guess as much with those guys. Better Boss said he moved Deontay Johnson for A.J. Dillon. Only had Javonte Swift and Khalil Herbert at running back, but have Higgins, Metcalf, and Garrett Wilson ahead of Johnson plus Alec Pierce and Kadarius Toney. Do you like it? I hate to be this guy, but I love Deontay Johnson. Last year was the worst case scenario for him. We've seen him get upwards. I mean, he averaged before last year 6.5 touchdowns this season. He literally had the worst luck season of all time. Over 130 targets with no touchdowns. The closest player up to him at that point had like 109 or 111 without a touchdown. So one of the worst luck seasons of all time. So he is a true bounce back candidate. And then I just don't know if there's a lot of upside for AJ Dillon. They did bring back Jones. The offense is not the same as it once was. So as much as I would love to tell you, like, yes, I love it, in Dynasty, it's probably not I think you could have gotten somebody better than AJ Dillon for Deontay Johnson, or I would have moved another receiver knowing that Deontay Johnson's a undervalued asset. I would have probably tried to move an overvalued asset as opposed to an undervalued one, personally. All right, after the huddle, what's up, man? A few questions here. In my Dynasty draft, tight ends are worth 1.75. Me and the co-owner drafted Kelsey. Always a very good choice, drafting Travis Kelsey. All right. Daniel says, can we talk a little Jonathan Mingo? We can absolutely talk a little Jonathan Mingo. So Jonathan Mingo, watching his tape was really interesting because typically what we're doing is we're looking for traits, not necessarily production. Now, when a guy has both, I love that. Like, I love seeing a player that has both production and traits. But if I'm having to favor one over the other, I'm probably going to favor the guy with traits and assume that there was something wrong in the offense, in the game plan with the quarterback that was causing him to not be as successful as he could have been. And watching his traits, the guy moves really well for a guy of his size. He can go up and get the ball. And we've seen a lot of Ole Miss receivers in recent memory do some really good things. DK Metcalf, Elijah Moore, AJ Brown, like lots of very good players produce from that Ole Miss system. So anytime that you have somebody with his traits, and then it got backed up with the draft capital. You know, it wasn't somebody that got a little bit of hype on Twitter, and then we look later and, oh, he got drafted in the 4th round. I don't know. He got drafted early in the second round. So when you have a player that's taken that early, that, you know, I personally really liked their tape. I think that he is, somebody that is, it's weird to say that he's a sleeper when you're drafted that high, but I think he's a little bit of a sleeper. So I like Jonathan Mingo. I have acquired him in several leagues, and this year there's nothing in the way. I mean, truly, there is nothing in the way from Jonathan Mingo becoming a legitimate asset. Adam Thielen's there, Terrace Marshall. Like, maybe those guys have a little bit better year one than we expect out of a rookie like Mingo, but long term, he has a chance to be that guy, and he could be the number one receiver in this class this year based on numbers. That is absolutely in the realm of possibility. So absolutely something to keep an eye on with Mr. Jonathan Mingo. All right, James says, do you partake in NA IDP leagues? What's your stance on IDP in general? Do the nerds intend on creating any video content on the subject? Sorry, it is a little off topic. Now, this is not off topic. I said you guys can ask any questions, and this is the question you asked. So I'm good to answer it. I have done several IDP leagues in the past. Now, it is interesting because I played for those that know, I did play college football. Not a long time, only a season, but I did play college football, and I was a linebacker. And so somebody with my, background, you would think that I would be all over IDP. Unfortunately, I am not. Not because I don't value the defensive side of football. In fact, I'm one of the few players outside of like the fantasy aspect of it. But if I'm just watching a good game, I'm fine watching a 13-10 game. No problem with that. As long as it's good football and it's not just like sloppy football, and that's why it's 10-13. Like if it's a good game where the defenses are making plays, they're attacking the offense, like no problem with that at all. So somebody that enjoys good defensive games and played linebacker in college, you would think I'd be more in on IDP, but unfortunately I'm really not. Part of it is there's only so much information that time will allow me to retain. And at one point I kind of had to pick. So Dynasty in general, if you think about it this way, there's fantasy football, and then Dynasty is a niche of fantasy football, and then IDP is a niche of Dynasty. So I had to kind of choose which niche of Dynasty I wanted to get into. I favored more the college aspect. So if I'm favoring any part of the Devy aspect or of the Dynasty aspect, the niche market, I'm probably going on the Devy side. So me personally, I don't really do a lot of IDP leagues. I was in a couple. I'm not in them anymore, partly because of that. I can only retain so much information. So I don't know a ton about the topic compared to other topics. And at some point, it's just, it can be a little overwhelming. And there's a lack of consistency. When I say PPR scoring, everyone knows what I'm talking about. When you talk about IDP, you're like, well, and I figure every time people have to explain what they mean. So, well, we get this many points for this, and we get this many points for this. And, there's not a neat way that's been streamlined. Now, some people have tried to figure out a format to streamline IDP and kind of make it a little bit easier to digest. But so far, they haven't been super successful. Now, we do have some IDP guys on the Dynasty Nerd staff, and there have been some articles written about IDP. I don't know how many guys that are still currently active with Dynasty Nerds we have doing IDP stuff, but that is something I'll look into, seeing if we want to create some content specifically on YouTube around the IDP game a little bit more, because we haven't done a lot of that, but it is something that I would be open to. So that was a very long version or a very long answer to your question. So hopefully all of that makes sense as to where we're at currently in the IDP space overall. All right, let's get back into this. Better Boss kind of responding to me talking about Deontay Johnson versus AJ Dillon. Won't AJ Dillon be better than last year too? It's tough to say. If AJ Brown or if Aaron Jones, I'm putting AJ Dillon and Aaron Jones together. If Aaron Jones was gone, then absolutely it'd be wheels up. And if something happens, an injury, something like that, we could definitely see an improvement. It's tough to say if AJ Dillon will be better or not. One school of thought is that they might lean on the run game a little bit more this year. If that's the case, that is a little bit of a boost to Dillon. However, the other school of thought is this offense might not be as efficient as it was under Aaron Rodgers. And typically when you have older quarterbacks like an Aaron Rodgers, like Peyton Manning was, like Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, Phillip Rivers, we saw all those guys, especially towards the end of their career, check it down more often, which we know in PPR leagues, those are gold. Those check downs to those running backs are such good value insulators for players. A young quarterback like Love, especially one that has some athletic ability, is going to be more apt to tuck and run more so than dump it off to a young running back. So that's kind of why I don't know that his value is going to increase much this year. If something happens to Aaron Jones, then that's absolutely true. But outside of that, I am worried that might not be the case. As After the Huddle says, is that Northwestern? Is that the college you played for, or just a helmet that you have? So this helmet that I have back here, it is Northwestern, but this is not the university. My high school that I played for was actually Northwestern. So that is why I have this helmet. Here. The university I played for is called Malone University. If you look up how their football team did this year, pretty terrible, because they actually cut their team 5 or 6 years after I was done playing, unfortunately. But there is a guy out there named Ashton Doolin that he plays for the Indianapolis Colts. Really, really good special teamer. I know some people have him on their dynasty rosters as well. He's had a few big weeks here and there. He is actually from Malone University and often referred to as the last pioneer, because his class was the last class that had football at Malone University. So I realized something. I don't actually know what IDP means. And yes, it's individual defensive player. But yeah, I guess if no one ever told you, you wouldn't know. All right. Let's see. Josh says that he is in a few. He likes it. Adds in an extra degree of difficulty. Scoring is hard, but IDP 1, 2, 3 is helpful. And yes, that is something. I believe Jordan Rains was a guy that was big on pushing IDP 1, 2, 3. I think it caught on for a little bit. I don't know if it's still as prevalent as it once was. But I know that is something that kind of was a helpful suggestion as to how we can kind of streamline this, how we can kind of make things a little bit more uniform, easier to answer questions, easier to know what you're getting into when you're going into these leagues. So something to consider there. Okay. I know we got some anime, I believe, talk going in here. So I don't think anything that I need to answer as far as that goes. Although I do have an anime story that I could tell you at some point. But Peter Bartowski, what's up, buddy? Any hope for Kyron Williams this year? Absolutely. There's absolutely still hope. Cam Akers is going to be the main guy. I think they are hoping he can finally fill those shoes. I'm still not ruling out a free agent running back going there. So that'll be kind of interesting to see if a Cook, a Ezekiel Elliott, a Kareem Hunt, somebody like that ends up there. But Kyron Williams is a fantastic blocking running back and a real good pass catcher. So while I don't know that there's hope to the level that we once had that he could be a really good asset, I think, the draft capital after the poor combine showing really kind of docked things down a little bit for him and his value. But there is absolutely still hope for him being a potentially usable fantasy asset during bye weeks and injuries, where he might be somebody that you can put in your flex, hope to get 4 or 5 catches a week, something like that. We'll see what happens with maybe Zach Evans. He could be somebody that comes in and steals things, but he wasn't great in third down situations compared to Kyron Williams. I think Kyron Williams is a much better third down back. So I see Zach Evans as more somebody that would spell Cam Akers more so than Kyron Williams. But I would not be shocked if another running back still enters into this equation before all things are said and done. All right. Let me see. Peter says, would you rather have Zach Evans or Williams? Zach Williams. Are you talking about Zach Williams? Or are you talking about a different Williams? Because I don't know who Zach Williams is. James says, why is Van Jefferson so faded in the dynasty community? We have to remember that we are all humans. We are all impatient. And Van Jefferson's a guy that's been talked about for a long time, but has still yet to really have that breakout season. That being said, James, I'm with you. I am still in on Van Jefferson. This year could be a year that he does really break out, but I think the hopes of what he could be have faded a little bit. And you hope at some point we see a high-end wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 2 season out of him. If that's the case, then we'll see. But yeah, I still like Van Jefferson. I understand why he's faded, but I still like him personally. Peter said he didn't want to write out Kyron. That makes more sense. Kyron Williams or Zach Evans. I guess I'll say Zach Evans purely from the standpoint of what if. What if everything falls together perfectly and he does become the player that he was out of high school and everyone thought he could be, and he steals that job from Cam Akers? While I put that below a 5% chance, I think we're probably at about a 1% chance of that happening for Kyron Williams. We already saw him last year. He looked meh. And hopefully things improve for him in year 2 when things start to slow down for him a little bit. But yeah. All right. Let's see. Dalvin Cook and Gibson or Elijah Moore and Chig? For me, that would be a win now versus a more of a rebuild, middle of the road question. If I'm going to win now, I think Dalvin Cook can help put me over the top this year. So I'd probably rather have Dalvin Cook and Gibson, but I'd rather Elijah Moore and Chigokonkwo in a rebuild. Sedated Fork says, if you have Lamar and Superflex, how worried about injury should you be? I don't think much more worried than you should be about any other player, honestly. I do subscribe to the injuries are fluky. Some players are just more unlucky than others, but we've seen several guys struggle with injuries for a while and then just be fine. Like, not an issue anymore, not anything to worry about. So I'm not overly worried. I think he is still more than worth a first round startup pick, probably somewhere within the top 8 or 9 picks. So I'm not overly worried about him. I'm hoping that the new offense plays well with his skill set. I think that would be probably my biggest question, more so than anything else. Lots of questions coming in here at the last minute. We are going to have to take a break in a moment. Let me see if I can give quick answers to these without going all the way through them. Jimmy Richardson said, I have a contending team, but only Saquon, Swift, and Cook at running back. Do I need to trade a wide receiver, Hill, Higgins, Cooper, Burks, Pickens, Sutton, Gabe Davis for a running back, or can I feel okay about that group? I would absolutely be looking for another running back. The good news is you don't have to worry about it. Assuming Cook signs with the team, you don't have to worry about this early. What I would prefer to do is I would prefer to wait, get closer to bye weeks, see how everything works out with your bye weeks, see what injuries look like, things like that, because there's nothing worse than trading for that insurance running back now. And then running back, we know, is a very volatile position with, players getting hurt, guys, losing their jobs, things like that. So that's a situation where I do want to get myself another running back, but I would prefer to wait a little bit longer into the season and then grab a 4th running back at that point. Jeffrey says, I have Breece Miles, Rashad White, and Rashad Penny, and Jarek trying to offload Swift for a wide receiver. Which wide receiver should I target for Swift? I would say probably the DJ Moore, Michael Pittman Jr. range. Those are the kind of players that I would be looking at to go after. So hopefully you kind of know the range of guys that I'm talking about there, but those are 2 guys that kind of come to top of mind as good potential targets in that range. Mingo or Burks? I'm going to go Burks. Love that they didn't do anything at the position. He showed flashes last year. We'll see if he can put it all together this year, but I would go Burks in that situation over Mingo. All right. All that being said, we are now going to take our final break of the night. When we come back, though, we are going to be talking to Mr. Dennis Bennett. Stay tuned.
What can we expect from you out there on the track tonight?
Listen, I have a wife, 2 kids. I have, full-time jobs. I'm never nervous. I don't even know what that word means. Can you explain what nervous means? No. I'm ready to have fun. I've never done anything like this before. I got asked to be a part of this. This is fascinating. Like, it's so cool to just look around and see what goes on here. So I'm just excited to get out on the horse. And you want trash talk? Is that what you're asking me for? No trash talk. I hope everyone does well.
All right, everyone's going to do well, but it has to be a winner. So give me your trifecta. Who's going to come in first, second, and third? Heat.
I will go Maria 1, me 2, Willie 3, Moose goes 4th.
Well, it's very simple. I won this event last year. I won my heat, and so the defending champ has to be the favorite. Now, that makes me a little nervous just because I feel like it's hard to repeat. There's a little pressure when you're the favorite, but that being said, I'm still optimistic.
So your heat, it's you,
Yes.
Moose and Keith from Better Sports Network, and Willie Colon.
I think Keith might be my stiffest competition, and I asked for this because I actually recruited Keith, if you didn't know. So Keith, if you win, you're welcome.
Malusis is very good. I mean, he knows what he's doing, but I'm going to go with Maria.
Keith is waving to the crowd. He must pay attention because they're off. It's Mark Malusis going for the lead. Maria Marino on the outside, and now Keith Irizarry on the outside with speed, and they're 3 wide into the first turn. Woo! Mark Malusis is locked in for his life. 138 and 2. They're into the stretch. Sportscasters Derby 2. And still in front, Keith Irizarry. And now Mark Malusis is trying to squeeze on through.
Come on! Back! Come on! Let's go! Come on, dig it! Yeah!
Keith Irizarry. Keith, you did it all the way, wire to wire, over Mark Malusis.
Awesome! That was so cool!
The champ is here! Keith, what was it like being out there? Adrenaline rush, you were doing the Instagram Live, so there was no panic. You looked cool, calm, collected the whole time, and you won it.
I felt really comfortable. I did. Like, I know you were joking with me before. Are you nervous? Are you whatever? What are you? David, the driver, was awesome. He's like, we're going to win this. I said, all right, let's win this. And he said, let's go. Yeah, I just felt really comfortable. I did. It was fun. We're in the lead. I got Maria Marino on the right side of me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's going to beat us, right? And then out of nowhere, you see Moose coming up this way, and we feel him breathing down our neck. And I'm like,
Moose
no!
on the loose. Watch out.
Moose was definitely on the loose, and we just got Moose by a neck, a nose, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but again, all of this for a great cause, and it was absolutely awesome to do this. It was cool.
All right, Keith, congratulations, and no matter what, you could always hold this over Moose's head.
Yeah!
Welcome back to the Dynasty Nerds, Better Sports Network. I'm your host, Garret Price, and I am joined by the great, the wonderful, the intelligent Dennis Bennett. Dennis, how's it going, buddy?
I think somebody sent you the wrong press packet.
Was it the wrong read?
No.
Dang it.
Dang it.
I hate it when that happens. Well,
Hey, I'm drinking coffee, Peter.
trying to stay
Decaf
awake.
in my motivational cup. You got this. That's what coffee says to me.
There you go.
It's
Well,
actually
before
decaf.
we get
It's
into
a heart issue, I drink decaf now.
makes sense. Before we get into all the things that we are going to talk about tonight, I want to mention the Fantasy Alarm Fantasy Football Draft Guide. That's right. It is available right now tonight. You can purchase it for $27, or what I would recommend, if you want to get it for free, which I like free things.
Free is good.
Free is very good. Free, one of the few words I can spell. You could get it absolutely free with a monthly or annual all-pro subscription to Fantasy Alarm. Start your free 7-day trial of Fantasy Alarm All-Pro and get immediate free access to the draft guide. Go to fantasyalarm.com. That is fantasyalarm.com. Dennis, how's your week been, my man?
Man, my week has been good. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. Unfortunately, I've got to work on Monday. I mean, I could have taken vacation, but it's payroll week, and I'm just making it easier on myself. Nobody will be there. I saw you and Jared tighten things up. I got a little do done myself, but mine just looks like I'm bald, so nobody notices.
Team haircuts, man. Team haircuts. That's what we're doing here.
Maybe we can get a volume discount next time.
Dennis, did you have as much fun with the all-time draft as I did last week? Because truly, I was mentioning earlier, and you maybe heard it if you, I know I saw you in the comments a little bit. It was truly one of the more enjoyable shows I think I've done.
I really like it because there's so many players to choose from. Like, yeah, you can go wrong, but man, there's so many great players. And, my favorite part was when the guy got mad in the chat because we were drafting people he didn't like. And so he decided to leave. I'm like, man, why you got to be like that? Do your own all-time draft if you think, put your own show on. These are guys we like and that we think are going to do great.
It's funny, too, because it's like there's like a consensus of all of the, like, yes, there's been lots of study done into the all-time players, and this is really who it should be. Like, no, this is just something we did randomly out of the blue. Like, I don't know about you. I had 10 to 15 minutes of prep before I went into it. Like, I wanted to make sure I knew some guys I liked early on, and then after that, it was flying by the seat of my pants.
Yeah, you told me I had pick one, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going Jerry Rice. Well, maybe LaDainian Tomlinson. Maybe Jerry. No. Well, I'll pick when I get there. It's like when that's how I order at a restaurant. Like, I look at the menu and I'll get like 3 things, and my wife will be like, "So what are you ordering?" And I'm like, "Well, it's going to be one of these 3 things." And then the waitress comes over, takes her order, and then I order something completely different. She's like, "Well, I thought you." I'm like, "Well, that just sounded good when whatever comes out of my mouth." Like, you can't go wrong with Jerry Rice or LaDainian Tomlinson. So
yeah, no, you really can't go wrong at all there. My wife at restaurants, what she does is she does the same thing into the beginning where she picks like 3, 4, 5 things, but she's super indecisive. So she always asks the waitress to pick for her, more or less. Like, tell me about these 5 things. Which one's the best? And she has the waitress pick typically. So,
well, I think that's a good strategy because they should know. They should have developed a favorite if they've been working there. So, like, I'm always cautious if I say, well, I'm deciding between these 2 things. Which one do you prefer? And they're like, oh, I've never had either of them. I'm either like, are you new or should I pick something else?
Yeah. No, that is a good point. I do appreciate it when the waiters and waitresses are honest. Because there's some they're like, oh yeah, you can't go wrong, everything's good, and then other ones will be like, do they make this pretty well here? And they'll be like, and you're like, okay,
I like this better.
Yes, exactly. So I always appreciate like the brutally honest waiters and waitresses at restaurants. All right, Dennis, a couple things that we wanted to talk about tonight. First one is some guys that might be good stashes late in draft, because we focus often on, the first 10 rounds, because obviously the first 10 rounds are crazy important. But often once you get to round 17, 18, 19, you're just kind of closing your eyes and throwing a dart. So with your dart throw, we want to try to make sure that these are as educated of dart throws as we could possibly have. So when you're making your dart throws, Dennis, who are some guys that you are looking at?
So some of the writers have been breaking down some deep stashes for Dynasty. And so that was where I started my research. Yeah. Stephen Pintato, Coach Stephen P., who's been on, Dwight Peebles, who's our assistant editor, works in the film room, Dr. Matthew Mitchell, Mr. Reflip with the news on Twitter. So they've been digging into each division and identifying some. And so I looked at their list and said, who do I like? Who would be my guys? Mm-hmm. And at the top of my list is Clayton Tune. Like, he's deep. He's got, Colt McCoy in front of him and an injured Kyler Murray. I think by and large, we don't think Murray's going to be back for 4, 6, 8, 10 games.
Sure.
There's some stretch. Maybe he is, but it looks like it looks like there may be a battle of, I don't know that Tune is the future, but we do know Colt McCoy is not.
Correct.
Now, if Arizona's terrible, they may be in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes, but that contract with Kyler Murray is very cumbersome. So it'll take some cap shenanigans to move on from him. It could be a situation where they're in cap hell for 2 years if they move on, and you've then wasted half of Caleb Williams' rookie contract, but it's still Caleb Williams. And with the 5th-year option, you get an extra year. With a franchise tag or two, you can get 7 years out of a rookie if the rookie hits. But by that 4th year, when they're ready to exercise that option, they usually know if this is a guy they want to extend. That being said, Clayton Tune could come in and be Davis Mills, maybe Davis Mills plus. If he comes in and plays, he's got good size, 6'2", 220. He's got a RAS of 9.83, so he's pretty mobile. He's got a decent arm, struggles a little bit with his mechanics, decent speed at 4.64 40.
Yeah.
And like Davis Mills was, it's all about the opportunity. And if you're stashing a guy late, especially if it's a rebuild maybe, this is a great guy to throw at the end. You're going to draft him late in the startup, probably 4th or 5th round in a rookie draft. And if he starts and he plays well for 3 or 4 weeks, this is a guy you can probably move if you're rebuilding. I like what he brings to the table. As a senior, he threw for over 4,000 yards and 40 touchdowns with 10 interceptions, a 4-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He was a 5-year student. A lot of guys took that extra COVID year, and he threw so leading up to his quote unquote second junior year, he hadn't surpassed 60% completions. In his 4th year and 5th year, he threw for 68 and 67% completions. So he took a big step in his growth. It was some of that just being a more mature guy, playing at the University of Houston in the American Athletic Conference. It could have been. But as we've seen with Brock Purdy, there's no substitute for game reps, even if you're Mr. Irrelevant. And Tune was a 5th-round pick. So he's coming in there. They're already talking positively about him. We know what and who Colt McCoy is. And as a Browns fan, I believe he kind of got shafted. But, not to say that he was, had Joe Montana potential. He just didn't get a real good opportunity, as about 15, 18 Cleveland quarterbacks didn't.
Yeah.
So I like Clayton Tune. I love the good size. I love the he's proved it in college. And so if he gets there, he could do something with Hollywood Brown, with Rondale Moore. Heck, Michael Wilson, Trey McBride, they've got some weapons. It'll all come down to it's not Steichen, it's Gannon in Arizona. The offensive team Gannon puts together, will they put Tune in a position to succeed if he does get that job early or end up going in if McCoy struggles? We've seen guys like, Ty Detmer be the starter, and after one game, Tim Couch is in there. It wouldn't be the first time there was a sacrificial veteran, and then they were just like, oh, screw it, let's just put the rookie in.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. The new OC in Arizona is Drew Petzing, and he was the quarterback's coach with the Cleveland Browns. So you assume that they're going to put in some two tight end stuff. They're going to run the ball to kind of help whoever the quarterback is along a little bit more than you might have in what was originally there, a much more wide open, just sling it and go offense. It'll be interesting to see how Clayton Tune transitions from that, because he did come from more of an air raid system at Houston. So we'll see how all of that kind of comes together, but definitely interesting. A guy that I am falling in love with, and it's one of those ones where I fell in love with him like too late, because I could have drafted him really cheap last year and I didn't. And then I could have like traded for him really cheap, and I still have had a hard time doing that. So I might have to like overpay for this player, but I'm okay doing it because I think he's more than worth it. That's Cade Otton. Cade Otton right now in Nerds ADP, we're talking like mid to early 200s overall. Right. So you're taking a boatload of tight ends ahead of him. At times you're taking team's second tight end over top of Tampa Bay's more than likely lead tight end. And the reason I say more than likely is, one, yes, things are a little different there, but still the same head coach. So looks pretty good in that sense. Last year, he actually had the 11th highest snap count out of all tight ends. As a rookie, the 11th highest snap count. And he would have had a lot more if he didn't have 30, 33, and 0 in his first 3 games. So when they committed to him being the guy, they committed to him being the guy, and he was out there early and often. You add in the fact that he was tied for 7th in red zone targets last year, and Baker, who's more than likely their starting quarterback, was 5th and 6th in the league in targeting the tight end his last 2 starting seasons for the Browns. So you put all of these things together, it really looks like Cade Otton is going to be on the field and fed a ton this year. And he's being taken way below most people's tight end 2 in startups. So I don't understand why he's not getting more hype, especially when we love to hype up young guys and young tight ends. He's getting almost no love anywhere, and I really don't understand it, to be honest.
Cade Otton is a perfect tight end for me because I'm on this don't draft high value rookie tight ends. Wait till they show you a little something. And it's perfect with that. He would have been a top 10 tight end in snaps if not for those first 3 games, probably. Yeah. There's no competition. Keeft.
Right.
All right. Payne Durham. Well, we know Payne Durham is slow. He's a big, slow dude. He's a blocking guy. Yeah. Those wide receivers, we may see a couple of those guys get moved just because they want to do right by him and they know they're not competing at some point. They may move Evans, or they may more likely Evans than Godwin, I think.
Sure.
Just because of where they are in their career. And then I like it. I love the call of Otton there.
Yeah, one of my favorites. Who else you got for me? Anybody else that you are really looking at as a stash that you wanna have at the end of your bench?
Yeah, well, so one of the things I did is I kind of look at, how secure are the people in front of them. And so I've got Xavier Holiday on the list, running back out of Wyoming, out of Arizona State via Wyoming. So he was another 5-year guy, and good size, 5'11", 204. He can probably stand to put on 6 or 8 pounds, get up over that 210 mark. He's got a 9.46 RAS, ran a 4.46 40. So at Arizona, his senior season, 1,100, almost 1,200 yards rushing, caught 37 passes. So he literally went to Arizona State after Rachaad White and was almost as good as Rachaad White. Now, he ended up being an undrafted free agent. And I've got a wide receiver on my list that I like, but I think as we look at wide receivers, if they don't have top 3 round draft capital, it's really, really hard. Like a 7th round to free agent running back has a better chance to hit on a top 24 season than a round 4, 5, or 6 wide receiver. I forget who put that work out there. I think it might have been Peter Howard or one of those analytics guys. But it just, looking at what Xavier Holiday brings to the table, he was second he was 4 years at Wyoming, left there, got his degree, was second in rushing in college, the school's history, led the Pac-12 in touchdowns. His only year at Arizona State was 16, had over 1,400 total yards. He was such a high sought-after undrafted free agent that he was given more guaranteed money than every other seventh rounder. So
that's so wild to me.
It shows so much how that teams are devaluing running backs. Everything is slid so far back. 10 years ago, he'd have probably been a 5th round pick.
Yeah, I think you're right.
He's more explosive than Devin Singletary or Dameon Pierce. Dameon Pierce was what, 4th rounder, I think?
Yep.
And well, I like Dameon Pierce. He's a 4th rounder. And much like Isaiah Pacheco, who was what, a 7th rounder, these are guys that are just there to take up space until somebody seizes it. And maybe they are the guy that seizes it. But I'm not counting on it. Pierce may have a decent year this year. He was having a really good year as a rookie, and then he got injured. Right. Devin Singletary, I think, is a highly underrated back, but he's very limited in what he can bring to the table at 5'7" and 203 pounds. He's okay pass catcher, does that well. Singletary isn't going to get a lot of volume. Valladay is a guy that can spell both of those guys, whether
right.
It's Singletary in the passing game or Pierce in the running game. And with his explosiveness, it gives him an opportunity to take a role and grab a bigger slice of the pie.
No, I'm with you. And anytime that you have a team where the starting running back is a non-superstar holdover, I always worry about that running back. And it's a new coaching situation. And even though Pierce performed well, I would not put him in the superstar category for sure. And he's a solid player, but nothing special. And teams love to get their guy. They want to get their guy in there. And anytime that they have an opening to get one of their guys in there, they absolutely could. So while I don't see like easily Valladay just outright supplanting Pierce, all it takes is an injury and him playing well for a while this guy is injured for him to take that job. So I do like those kind of guys where if things go a certain way, this kind of thing could happen. Daniel, you asked when I normally stream. Every Thursday night, we're on here. So Thursday night, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern time. Dennis is with me every week for the last 45 minutes or so as well. So you'll see both of our ugly mugs each and every week moving forward.
This is a beautiful mug. I mean, look
at
that.
That is true. That is a great mug. That is a great mug. Well, another player that I had as a stash is Keontae Ingram, and it's coming from the same team, the Arizona Cardinals. And it's similar to what I just talked about, where anytime there's a non-superstar running back and it's a new team, they want to get their guy. Now, I'm not convinced Keontae Ingram is their guy. He was a holdover as well. But a team that we expect to be terrible, we expect this team to be very, very bad this year. You factor that in with James Conner is an older player that hasn't had the best injury history over the course of his career. And we could see this at any point in the year going to well, dang, this season's over. Let's see what we got in some of these kids. And you could absolutely have Keontae Ingram as the starting running back at week 12, week 11. Like, that is absolutely in the realm of possibility. And now you have yourself a new starting running back for your playoff run when teams usually get depleted. You might have somebody joining on to your squad as a starter. So I mentioned Drew Petzwig as the starting offensive coordinator. So he is going to be looking to run the football. I don't know that he's going to be doing it as much as, what we've seen out of other Stefanski and like schemes, but we do know that he's going to be looking to run the football. And when healthy, James Conner was good last year. So if he's replacing James Conner at any point due to injury or just due to let's see what the kid's got, I mean, in a PPR setting, points per game wise, he was 10th in points per game last year. So he should be able to get a good workload. And if he does, he could be somebody that can contribute for your fantasy team down the stretch. So anybody else we want to touch on, or we want to get to this draft, Dennis?
Let's go ahead and get to the draft since
you had somebody you wanted to say. I can tell.
Well, I like Brenton Strange. I like Brenton Strange, and I don't know how much of a sleeper he is. He was a second-round pick. He's already listed as the second teamer in Jacksonville. But Evan Ingram is so he to me he falls in the same category right now as Cade Otton, where everybody's so focused on how good Evan Ingram was last year and how we expect this team to take a step in year 2 with Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson, and they've added Calvin Ridley. Yep. And Evan Ingram looked great last year. But Evan Ingram is on a 1-year contract, and he's pushing 30 years old. Brenton Strange, while being a second-round draft pick, had a 9.09 RAS score. So he's an athletic tight end. 4.54 40, or no, wait, 4.7 40. Almost 6'4", 253 pounds. He had a 1.58 10-yard split, which isn't too bad. A 7.25 3-cone at 250 plus pounds. It's not too bad. So, and you got Doug Peterson, who made the 2 tight end offense just click in Philadelphia.
Right.
I think if you're getting Strange, you're going to have to get him like soon, because I don't think he's going to be as under the radar come October, September. I think we're going to see. I feel like as much as I love Tank Bigsby, and I think Travis Etienne's pretty good as well, I think Trevor Lawrence is going to throw the ball a lot because they've got a lot of weapons. And Lawrence can run the ball well, too, at 6'6". He's a weapon in the running game. He's just kind of one of those guys that only runs when he has to. But, man, Brenton Strange looks like he's going to bring some. He's not quite as fast as Evan Ingram, not quite as athletic, but still plenty athletic enough that if you can add him now before the season starts, that's a guy you want to get.
Absolutely. All right, Dennis, let's get into this draft that we were talking about and alluding to. Now, Dennis and I were in the same rookie draft, and this is, an industry league. So this is partly Dynasty Nerds guys, partly Dynasty Trade Calculator guys. So we formed a league a few years ago, and we just had our rookie draft not too long ago. And Dennis brought up the idea of like, why don't we go through that a little bit? And I liked the concept. So we're going to touch a little bit on this rookie draft, maybe talk about some of our picks because our teams are kind of in a similar spot at this point, and just kind of break things down. So Dennis, what was the thing that when looking at this, you're like, I want to talk about our startup draft because of this? Like, what was that thing that you had in your mind?
So I had some extra picks in this draft, and I got to be honest, I feel like I botched some of them. And so it's like I'm doing a little bit of an autopsy here as I look at, because my team is in a rebuild. So sort of a history of my team in this league. In the very first year of this league, I think I was 1-5 or 1-6, and I was third in scoring. And it's literally, it was 12:30 in the morning, and I was talking with Etan Mosia on Twitter. We're DMing, talking about a trade. Can we get one done? And I'm looking at my team thinking, I can't believe I'm 1-6. And I'm sitting there, and it's late. Everybody's in bed, and I should be in bed. And I'm thinking, and all of a sudden I looked at my points for, and I'm like, damn, I'm third in points for. And so when you look at that, it's like, what are my choices? Am I going to blow it up already, or am I going all in? And I went all in. I went from talking about trading 2 of my high-profile players to Etan to now making moves and accumulating players and win. Now, I made the playoffs. I made a run, and I made the playoffs. Stompy knocked me out of the playoffs. It's second round of the playoffs. Honestly, my team just kind of crapped the bed. So, but I had made that run, and then the next year I kind of fumbled around what was going on. You know, I felt like I could have been a contender, but it just didn't it just didn't pan out. And so as we started to turn the corner on about the halfway, 3/4 mark of the season, I started going into a rebuild. And, you know, I started to move my players and trying to acquire some picks. It was just, I was so disappointed that because that first year, when I made the commitment to go for it, I thought, I went on a run and I was like, man, this team is going to make it. And I just had like 3 or 4 guys in the second week of the playoffs just have bad weeks. And I just couldn't overcome it that week. And so, you know, I was looking at this draft, probably my biggest regret. So I had the 104 and I went with CJ Stroud.
I'm assuming that's not the pick you regret. That's, you know, pretty typical.
I had 2 first-round picks. So earlier in the offseason process, I was smitten with Jonathan Mingo. I like Mingo a lot, and
team big wide receiver.
Yep, I'm team big wide receiver, and so he kind of fits my, you know, he's my Huckleberry, and so I'm looking at it, and as the summer has gone on, I've cooled a little bit. Mingo is like a sci-fi movie, would be my analogy, where when you go in, you have to suspend some reality, or you're just going to sit there in the movie and go, well, that can't, no. So you have to suspend reality. So when you look at Mingo, there's 2 separate profiles. There's the analytics profile, and the numbers are awful. And there's the physical profile, and the numbers are fantastic. Now, some of the analytics, some of the statistics weren't all his fault. You know, that the team wasn't great. I'm still, but you know, there were guys like Charbonnet, Will Levis. You know, maybe I could have taken a shot. I'm rebuilding, so taking another quarterback wouldn't have been the worst move. You know, if I was prone to taking a tight end, Laporta or Mayer were there. But really, my move there should have been to trade back from the 111.
Yeah, it's the 111 is a kind of a tough spot this year because you're kind of out of that range of the first round receivers anymore. So let me ask you this. Did Will Levis interest you at all? Because I know from a quarterback, you know, valuing a quarterback in a super flex league, that was probably the range that he could have gone.
Yeah.
But I know I've seen it varied. I've seen him go as early as 110. I've seen him fall to, you know, 3rd or 4th pick of the 2nd round. So he's varied a lot for people. What were your thoughts on that?
So at the time we did this draft, which was a week after the NFL draft, maybe
something like that.
I was still cold on Levis. So now here we are. We're almost in July, several drafts under my belt. Now I'm looking at Levis when I'm doing drafts from the standpoint of I should probably get a couple shares just in case. You know, he may pan out. I don't think so, but he could. And for what he's going for now, if it's in the early 2nd round, you know, that's certainly palatable. So I haven't acquired any yet, but I've still got a couple more drafts to go. It's still a possibility. I think as early as we come off, like we're hammering from January to the draft. You know, Dynasty Nerds is hammering rookie content. We're film watching. We're writing articles. We're doing profiles. We're running threads. We're doing rankings. We're doing mock draft after mock draft after mock draft. We're analyzing combines and all-star games and just going at it. And then we come out of the draft and we try to match up all of that pre-draft information that we've assembled into a profile for a player and make it match what the NFL is telling us. or see maybe what they're not telling us. Now, I think Mingo has a great opportunity to be, he could be Mike Williams.
Yeah,
which is the guy that may have an outstanding year or two here or there, but for the most part, it's probably a wide receiver 3.
Makes sense. So your next 3 picks after that, you had 3, if I'm counting correctly, 3 second-round picks. At 2-2, you took Tank Bigsby. At 2-7, Roshan Johnson, and 2-8, Hendon Hooker. How do you feel about all those picks?
So, well, from a personal standpoint, I love Tank Bigsby.
Right. We agree on that.
I'm in a rebuild, and taking running backs doesn't make a ton of sense. Now, as I sit here and look at my draft, I also took Dwayne McBride in the 3rd, Sean Tucker in the 4th. So to me now, as I sit and look back at this draft, my hope is that they produce to allow me to get draft capital.
Sure.
Or produce to allow me to get, a young wide receiver. So that's where I'm at with them. And I'm not normally a guy that, I don't like to draft a player with the intention of trading him just because that's where his value sits. Like, sure. I literally have had 2 drafts with the 101 where my team is, Bijan Robinson just doesn't belong on my team. And I've traded back to the 102 in both of those leagues and took Anthony Richardson, who theoretically should have a much longer tail on his career if he pans out. Now, if he doesn't, I'm still rebuilding. And I'm that guy everybody makes fun of that spends 9 years in rebuild.
Yeah, well, we're in a similar boat. I made the playoffs 4 straight years, several 3rd place finishes, and just recouping my money back more or less. Never seemed to, always the bridesmaid, never the bride kind of thing. And it was the point where I could have made another year push. I had like guys like Rodgers, Joe Mixon, Stephon Diggs. Like I had a team where I could have done it, but I decided to try to get out maybe a year early as opposed to a year too late. So I also had 2 first-round picks. I had picked 1-5 and I had picked 1-7. 1-5 is an interesting spot because typically, and it fell this way in this draft, you have your choice between Gibbs and Jackson Smith and Jigba. I actually went with Jackson Smith and Jigba, which it seems like 90% of the time people are going Gibbs over in Jigba. With the right move, or do you think Gibbs is just a superior player, so I shouldn't have done that? Like, what were your thoughts there?
I'm really torn on it because I think in a rebuild situation, 99 times out of 100, the wide receiver is the player to take.
Right.
But in this case, I think there's a lot of consensus about Gibbs kind of being an Austin Eckler kind of back that maybe not with quite as much rushing upside as Eckler, but really high volume passing game and a decent amount of touches on the ground because of how explosive he is. And because he's not hammering into the line 250 times a year, the shelf life is expected to be longer. But we also look at Jackson Smith and Jigba, and there's kind of this new crop of slot slash, they're like outside half, they're like 1.5 slot and a half outside receiver. They're big
these
enough,
big slots.
Yeah, they're big enough and they're fast enough that they can give you some snaps on the outside, but they really excel in the slot. Like Amon-Ra St. Brown's another great example.
Sure.
Smith and Jigba went to a situation where he's got guys in front of him. I think he's a great complement to what DK Metcalf brings to the table. But I still think Tyler Lockett has plenty left in the tank for the next couple years. And the concern is that Pete Carroll won't throw the ball enough to support 3 guys.
Sure.
But also we've seen, Pete Carroll had no issues pushing Doug Baldwin out the door. So
it's true. And I think that was part of the thing for me was I'm not as worried about Tyler Lockett. And honestly, if my team sucks this year, that's okay. I don't need it to be good this year. I wasn't planning on winning the ship this year anyway in a rebuild. Right. So that was part of the philosophy too, is, I can wait a year or two for him to kind of come fully to his potential and not have to stress about the value there. So then at 1-7, I kind of hate picking at 1-7 because I feel like it's the beginning of a tier. And this draft got a little messed up. I had actually traded back twice and taken Dalton Kincaid, but where people were supposed to pick and all these different things got all messed up. And now everybody knew who I was going to take. And now people that were behind me were now ahead of me. And so I was worried that they were going to take, because I wanted one of two guys, either Dalton Kincaid or Jordan Addison. I ended up just staying put at 1-7 and taking Jordan Addison. How do you feel about him versus Kincaid, Quentin Johnston, Zay Flowers, guys of that ilk?
So Jordan Addison, he didn't measure great, but man, the tape is fantastic. In Pittsburgh, great tape in USC. The biggest concern I have with him is who's the quarterback in Minnesota next year? What are they going to do? Because they've telegraphed it's not going to be Kirk. So they're going to need to bring somebody in there. I think Addison can be very productive. He could be a high-end wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 2 if they pass the ball enough. Now they've gotten rid of Dalvin, so they're not it doesn't look like they're going to focus as much on the running game. They're with O'Connell, they're going to move more towards the passing game. So it'll be interesting to kind of watch how things play out next offseason. I like Addison a lot.
All right, Dennis. Well, any other quick notes you want to mention on this? We've got about a minute and a half before we're out of here. Any other quick notes you want to make about this draft?
No, not about this draft. But before we go, I want to congratulate our P1 listener, Just Josh, who got into the Scott Fish Bowl today.
Yeah.
Congratulations, buddy. I know that, it's something you were hoping for, and we're excited to have you in there. And then I just want to give a shout out to my wife. You may have saw on Twitter. Yesterday was my 23rd sobriety anniversary, and my wife and kids showed up at my work with my 23-year coin, brought me a couple monsters, and it's something I work hard to maintain, and my life has gotten infinitely better since I made that choice.
Awesome. Well, we're proud of you, man, and we're really happy to have you on board at Dynasty Nerds and all the things you bring. So, all right. Well, for Dennis Bennett, you can find him on Twitter at Culture Coach, talking about articles and all things fantasy football, tons of other shows and things that he's involved in as well. So make sure to check him out. You can find me on Twitter at Dynasty Price. Thank you so much to Dennis, to Jared earlier for joining us, Heavy T, and we will see you guys next week.
Our hair will be shaggy by then.